Grace Fulton's world has tumbled into chaos, a maelstrom of guilt and terror from which there seems no escape. What began as a clandestine series of experimental procedures on patient Spencer has become a living nightmare, a nightmare fueled by an anonymous puppeteer whose sinister demands have forced Grace ever further down a dark path. It started innocently enough, at least in Grace's compromised mind. Spencer, teetering on the brink of neurological collapse, needed unconventional treatment. Grace, brilliant and ambitious, convinced herself that her secret techniques, tweaks to deep brain stimulation protocols, off-the-books infusion of neuroregenerative compounds, offered Spencer the best chance of recovery. But almost as soon as Grace initiated her unsanctioned interventions, the first blackmail video arrived. Grainy footage of her accepting an envelope of cash from a shadowed figure, recorded in a clandestine meeting outside Grace's clinic. The message was clear. Continue the procedures without question, or the tape would be forwarded to the state medical board, ensuring the end of Grace's career, her medical license, and her freedom. At first, Grace tried to defy her tormentor. She stopped returning the anonymous caller's messages. She destroyed the illicit cash. She vowed to report the blackmail to hospital security. But each act of defiance was met with a more ominous threat. A voice modulated beyond recognition, delivered over a secure line. You have 24 hours to resume your work on Spencer. Our investment in his recovery is substantial. Disobedience will cost you more than your license. It will cost you everything you've built. Grace felt her resolve crumble. She returned to Spencer's bedside, forced a smile that never reached her eyes, and activated her covert regimen under the guise of routine care. Each night, she updated her tormentor. Session completed. Patient shows initial improvements. Each night, the voice replied with a cold, good. Maintain protocol. But the burden on Grace's conscience grew unbearable. She saw the fear in Spencer's eyes as she slipped him experimental sedatives that left him semi-conscious. She watched his body twitch under the effects of neurochemical injections, unable to fully evaluate whether her innovations were healing him or hastening his demise. Each morning, she roamed the hospital halls like a ghost. Haunted by guilt over her deception, by the knowledge that she was betraying everything she believed a physician should be. And all the while, the blackmailer's grip tightened. One day, Grace arrived to find an envelope on her desk containing a second tape. This one depicted an even more damning encounter, showing her falsifying Spencer's charts and discussing the off-record procedures with a collaborator whose face was intentionally obscured. A note slipped inside read, "One more refusal, one more slip-up, and we'll add this to your file. Consider your reputation and your license sealed." Terrified of professional ruin and desperate to keep her secret from leaking, Grace began to hatch a plan so reckless, so fraught with peril, that it would endanger two innocent lives rather than one. The blackmailer wanted proof of progress, of new data, of viable samples demonstrating Spencer's brain was responding to treatment. Grace's options were dwindling. She could not jeopardize Spencer further. He was already vulnerable, his life balanced on a knife edge. But if she could produce an authentic sample of healthy cerebral tissue, analyzed under sterile conditions, she could send the report to her blackmailer, convincing them she had triumphed. Then, perhaps, the extortion would end. But where to get such a sample without breaching patient confidentiality or risking her soul? Her solution was audacious and horrifying. She would drug Steffi Forrester, healthy, unguarded, unsuspecting, and surreptitiously harvest a small section of cortical tissue during what would appear to be a routine wellness exam. The kind of minimally invasive biopsy she could conceal within a battery of tests. It would end when it began, with Steffi none the wiser and no visible scars to betray the procedure. Grace convinced herself it was the only way to protect Spencer and herself. The execution of Grace's plan unfolded in the glossy calm of Forrester Creations' private medical suite, a sleek room outfitted with the latest diagnostic equipment, normally reserved for corporate health evaluations and elite clientele. Steffi arrived for her scheduled annual checkup, greeted by Grace's deceptively warm smile. No one else was present. Liam had stepped out to take a call, leaving his wife alone with the doctor she trusted implicitly. Grace led Steffi through innocuous vitals, blood pressure, reflex tests, and EKG while her mind raced. She prepared the anesthetic, a potent cocktail of propofol and fentanyl, dosed to induce deep unconsciousness for precisely 20 minutes, long enough to perform the biopsy, but short enough to avoid arousing suspicion. She wired Steffi for an extended EEG, ostensibly to monitor for any neurological anomalies, but, in truth, to mask the biopsy instrument's signals. Then, with a trembling hand, Grace loaded the syringe and injected Steffi's foreline. Within seconds, Steffi's lids fluttered, her breathing slowed, and she slipped into unresponsive tranquility. Grace steadied her nerves, donning surgical gloves and sterilizing the biopsy site behind Steffi's ear. Using a needle-tipped drill and a slender cannula, she penetrated the skull's thinnest point, extracted a small cylinder of brain matter, and sealed the opening with medical adhesive so expertly that no trace would show in routine scans. All of it took less than 15 minutes. Grace placed the sample in a sterile vial, labeled only with a code, and slipped it into her bag. She uttered a silent apology to Steffi, whose chest rose and fell in the grip of anesthesia, and switched the oxygen to pure air, allowing the anesthetic to clear naturally. Within minutes, Steffi's color returned, her breathing normalized, and she awoke with a soft groan, blinking confusion. "Are you all right, Dr. Fulton?" Steffi asked groggily, concern warping her voice as she sat up too quickly. "Absolutely," Grace replied with a reassuring smile. "Just some minor discomfort from the EEG leads. Nothing to worry about. You'll be fine." She helped Steffi to her feet and escorted her to the waiting area, where Liam re-entered. Neither noticed Grace's sweat-dampened brow or the slight trembling of her hands as she guided them out. Grace vanished into the supply closet, closed the door behind her, and dialed the blackmailer's secured number. A curt, automated tone picked up. Grace pressed 1 to send the sample report and whispered, "It's done. You have your tissue. Now leave me and Spencer alone." Silence stretched before the blackmailer's voice emerged once more, this time with a chilling calm. "Impressive work, Doctor. We'll be in touch." And then the line clicked dead. Relief momentarily washed over Grace, but it was short-lived. The realization of what she had done roared through her conscience. She had violated every principle of medicine, risked Steffi's life and Liam's well-being, and surrendered her moral compass for the sake of blackmail. Yet worse still was the fear that the blackmailer might not stop here. Having proven Grace's desperation, they now knew her willingness to harm others to protect herself. Tomorrow they could demand more samples, more procedures, more secrecy. Grace sank to the floor, cradling her head in her hands, the vial of Steffi's brain tissue now a symbol of her irredeemable descent. Liam and Steffi returned home oblivious to the invisible bullet they had narrowly avoided. Liam kissed Steffi's forehead as she drifted off to sleep that night, unaware of the horrors that had transpired in the sterile walls of that clinic. But Grace could not sleep. She stared at the ceiling of her apartment, haunted by visions of Steffi unconscious, of Spencer's tortured face as his neurological status hung in the balance, of the blackmailer's shadow looming larger each hour. She knew that only one path remained if she hoped to end this nightmare, expose her tormentor at the risk of her own freedom. But to do so, she would need allies, someone with the courage to stand beside her when the tapes and secret files emerged. And she would need proof of the blackmailer's identity, evidence that could outshine the damning footage they held of her. It would be the most dangerous gamble of her life, pitting her against a foe who had already proven ruthless enough to blackmail a doctor into jeopardizing two patients' lives. And so, at the dead of night, Grace Fulton's penance began. Quietly gathering logs from clinic security cameras, collecting suspicious phone records, tracing digital footprints, and planting seeds of doubt in the ears of hospital administrators. Every clandestine meeting, every encrypted email, every whispered suspicion brought her closer to the truth she hoped would free her from the tyrant's hold, but might also unleash a revelation that could destroy her career, her every relationship, and the safety of those she loved. In the balance lay justice for Spencer and Steffi, the integrity of her oath as a healer, and the fragile line between salvation and ruin. And as the first rays of dawn breached the sky, Grace emerged from the shadows of her apartment, resolute. The battle for her soul, and for the lives she had endangered, had only just begun. Taylor's obsession with keeping Brooke away from Ridge has reached fever pitch. Convinced that no scheme is too brazen to thwart their reunion, she turned to Donna. Brooke's one-time confidant and someone who knows the Logan family's secrets inside and out, as her personal love counselor. Taylor's plan was straightforward yet ruthless. Have Donna insinuate herself back into Brooke's inner circle, nurture Brooke's latent animosity toward Ridge, fan the embers of old grudges, and ensure that any spark of reconciliation between Ridge and Brooke is extinguished before it even flickers. It was a masterstroke in manipulation, the kind of chess move that only a woman driven by jealousy and fear of abandonment could conceive. Donna, acutely aware of Brooke's vulnerabilities, her mistrust of Taylor, her guilt over past betrayals, her lingering heartache over Ridge's wavering affections, was the perfect instrument to sow discord. Under Taylor's direction, Donna began planting seeds of doubt in Brooke's mind, reminding her of every slight, every whispered rumor, every moment Ridge had ever faltered. But Donna's loyalties were not as steadfast as Taylor believed. On the eve of the Forrester Board's historic vote on signing a billion-dollar contract with a prestigious Italian designer, an agreement that would secure the company's future and elevate its runway to the heights of Milanese couture, Donna enacted a startling betrayal. Unbeknownst to Taylor, she had recorded Taylor's private rant at a closed-door meeting of the Forrester Board. There, in a tone dripping with contempt, Taylor had publicly lambasted Brooke, accusing her of scheming for Ridge's affection, calling her manipulative, unworthy of Forrester's trust, and warning that Brooke's presence at the helm could jeopardize the company's stability. Donna seized Taylor's incendiary words and, with surgical precision, leaked the recording to both the Logan sisters and key members of the Forrester Board at the worst possible moment. As the boardroom filled with executives and designers in crisp suits and breathless anticipation, the conference room screens flickered to life, not with a presentation of sketch renderings or sales forecasts, but with audio waves and shattered camaraderie. Taylor's voice boomed over the speakers, unedited and unrestrained, every syllable a dagger to Brooke's reputation. The assembled guests froze. Ridge's expression soured. Members of the board exchanged horrified glances. All thoughts of contracts and couture vanished, replaced by a deafening silence that echoed the rupture of a family under siege. Brooke, unprepared for such a public assault, felt her heart lurch as the room turned on her. Every eye that once admired her grace now glared with suspicion. Every colleague who nodded in approval now recoiled in shock. Stephanie's portrait, hanging proudly in the hallway, seemed to scowl in silent judgment. Brooke's breath caught, her mind racing to comprehend the betrayal that had exploded at the worst conceivable juncture. Across the table, Taylor's face was a mask of mortified fury, her secret strategy laid bare, her reputation tarnished by her own words. But the fallout extended far beyond Taylor's humiliation. Donna's machinations had lit the fuse on a full-scale Logan sister war. Brooke, outraged by Taylor's vicious character assassination, lashed out at her sister publicly for the first time in years. Accusations flew. Brooke denounced Taylor's misguided vendetta. Taylor accused Brooke of abandoning their family. Each sister reminded the other of past sins and grievances, their voices growing louder, more pained, until their tear-streaked faces mirrored the wreckage of a relationship beyond repair. The board meeting devolved into chaos as the Forrester executives watched the family implode, their billion-dollar deal slipping through their fingers like so much spilled champagne. In the aftermath, the corridors of Forrester Creations buzzed with whispered speculation. The Italian designer's representatives, once dazzled by the promise of Forrester's influence, now hesitated, eyeing the boardroom footage that had gone viral across social media and entertainment news sites. Shareholders demanded explanations. Analysts called for damage control. Ridge, caught in the storm, struggled to protect both the company he loved and the two women who had defined his life. He confronted Donna in the hushed glow of the atrium, demanding to know why she had betrayed Taylor's confidence and indirectly Brooke's trust. Donna's defenses crumbled as she confessed that she had grown tired of being Taylor's pawn and had decided to expose Taylor's true nature to the world. Ridge, torn between gratitude for the truth and anger at the deception, walked away with a bruised heart and a fractured family legacy. Meanwhile, Taylor, humiliated yet unbowed, retreated to her private chambers, where she plotted her next move amid framed photos of Logan's siblings in happier times. The revelation that Donna had played them both created a new target for Taylor's ire and a shiny new rallying cry for her supporters within the company. She vowed vengeance. Anyone who stood between her and her desires would pay the price. But as Taylor steeled herself for the battles ahead, she could not ignore the searing truth laid bare by her own words, that she had let jealousy and fear override every other consideration, and in doing so, she had threatened the very foundation of the Forrester empire. Brooke, for her part, grappled with her raw emotions. The humiliation she suffered before the board fueled her determination to restore her good name and protect the company's future. She rallied loyal colleagues, talented designers, steadfast assistants, and even Stephanie's closest friends, reminding them of the legacy Stephanie had built and the integrity upon which it stood. Together, they launched a public relations campaign showcasing Forrester's designs, its philanthropic initiatives, and Brooke's own decades of dedication. Press releases featured interviews with designers who praised Brooke's creative vision. Charity events highlighted her commitment to social causes. Fans flooded social media with messages of support under the hashtag #StandWithBrooke. The tide of public opinion began to turn as people recognized the truth. Brooke was more than the sum of Taylor's jealous barbs. Yet the contract with the Italian designer remained in limbo. Negotiations faltered as the designer's lawyers insisted on clauses protecting them from association with scandal. Forrester Creations risked losing its most lucrative partnership in years, one that would define the company's spring collection in Milan and reinforce its status as a global fashion powerhouse. In response, Brooke proposed a radical solution: combine the design talent of Ridge, an inspired entourage of Italian artisans, and a curated collection celebrating unity and redemption. She pitched a joint runway show in Los Angeles and Milan simultaneously, promising to turn the company's crisis into a triumphant comeback story. The board met once more, tension crackling in the air like static before a storm. Taylor, still smarting from her own exposure, sat at the head of the table, flanked by Ridge and Brooke on either side. Statements were made, counterarguments presented, and at last, the executives voted. By a narrow margin, they approved Brooke's proposal, an endorsement not only of her vision, but of her leadership at the darkest hour. The Italian designer, moved by Brooke's willingness to bridge divides and salvage the partnership, agreed to the joint venture under revised terms. As plans unfolded for the dual-location show, a bold first in the industry, the Logan sisters' feud took on a new dimension. Forced to work together for the company's sake, Brooke and Taylor found themselves back in the same creative sessions, sharing the same conference calls with Italian counterparts, and scanning the same fabric swatches. Each interaction crackled with old resentments, but also with the faintest possibility of reconciliation. Brooke, whose heart ached at the rift with Taylor, extended an olive branch by acknowledging Taylor's dedication to protecting her family's legacy, even if her methods had been misguided. Taylor, confronted with the tangible consequences of her actions, jeopardized deals, fractured relationships, and bruised reputations, began to question whether her crusade against Brooke had truly served the family or only satisfied her own insecurities. In the final moments before the collection's debut, backstage at the Los Angeles Pavilion, Brooke and Taylor found themselves alone amid racks of couture gowns embroidered with intricate Italian lace. The noise of dressers and stylists faded as they confronted each other. Brooke's voice was steady but heartfelt. She offered forgiveness and a plea for partnership. Taylor, her defenses wavering, recalled the strength they once drew from each other, the times they had united against outside threats, and the shared memories of childhood laughter. In that quiet, charged instant, they chose a fragile truce, one built on the recognition that their bond as sisters and co-heirs to the Logan legacy mattered more than any rivalry. As the lights dimmed and the first models stepped onto the runway, simultaneous shows lit up screens in Los Angeles and Milan. The audience erupted in applause not only for the designs, but for the story behind them, a story of betrayal and redemption, of ambition and forgiveness, of sisters torn apart and brought back together by the very art they loved. In that moment, Brooke, Taylor, and Ridge stood united on opposite sides of the world, connected by streaming video, each holding their breath as the final model struck her pose. The thunderous ovation that followed was more than a triumph for Forrester Creations. It was proof that even the deepest wounds can heal when pride is set aside and the heart dares to forgive.